There are stories in the Quran that rise gently from a single verse and echo through the centuries. Stories where wisdom whispers louder than armies, and even the smallest of Allah's creatures carry messages of eternal weight. This is one of those stories. In the lands where the desert meets the gardens, under a sky painted in the hues of dawn, there marched an army unlike any the world had ever seen. An army vast, mighty, and magnificent. Its ranks formed not just of men, but of jinn, birds, and beasts. They moved in perfect harmony, the ground gently trembling beneath their feet and wings. This was not the army of an ordinary king. This was the army of Suleman, son of Dawood, a prophet of Allah, peace be upon them both, a ruler blessed with knowledge, power, and insight that surpassed the bounds of men. He was given a gift that no other prophet before him had been granted, the ability to understand and speak the language of all creatures, human, jinn, bird, and beast alike. But on this day, that divine gift would carry a lesson so profound that it would be preserved forever in the Quran. The air was thick with purpose. Flags fluttered in the wind, horses trotted in rhythm, and birds soared above the formation, acting as scouts from the sky. Jinn, unseen by human eyes, moved swiftly alongside the army, serving the Prophet King with loyalty. Discipline radiated from every unit, yet amidst the grandeur of the march, Suleman, peace be upon him, remained humble, his heart connected to his Lord. At the front of the caravan, Suleman rode in silence. His eyes were not on the might of his army, nor the lands ahead. His heart was in constant remembrance, for though he commanded nations, he knew the true king was Allah, the one who gives and withholds. His father, Dawood, peace be upon him, had taught him that rule without justice is tyranny, and justice without compassion is cruelty. As the army advanced, they approached a valley few men noticed. A stretch of low earth, nestled between two hills, mostly barren, save for sparse blades of grass and cracks where dew sometimes pooled. But beneath that soil, beneath the dust so easily ignored, lived a civilization. Small, silent, hidden, a valley of ants. They were workers, guardians, builders, mothers. Thousands upon thousands moved within their tiny city, tunnels and chambers carved beneath the earth, homes built with devotion, all unseen by those who walked above. And among them lived a wise ant, a leader, old and alert, always watching for danger. This day, the earth rumbled slightly beneath her feet, a shift, a vibration, foreign yet familiar. She emerged from the mouth of a tunnel and looked up at the horizon. Dust clouds gathered in the distance, shadows cast long over the land, and then she saw it, an army, vast and mighty, men, beasts, and birds, moving like a tide that could not be stopped. The leader of the ants knew the truth. This was the army of Suleman. A prophet, yes, but also a king, a man at the head of powers, far beyond what ants could resist. She looked around at her people, hundreds of her kind moving about, unaware of the danger approaching. If they did not act now, they would be crushed, not by cruelty perhaps, but by the sheer force of ignorance. Who notices an ant beneath their foot? She could not allow it. Until when they came upon the valley of the ants, an ant said, "O ants, enter your dwellings lest Suleman and his hosts crush you while they perceive not." One voice, one creature, so small, yet so full of concern, not only for herself, but for her entire nation. She did not cry out with fear, but with wisdom. She assumed good of the prophet, and knew he would never harm them knowingly. Yet still, she took action. Her cry echoed through the valley, inaudible to human ears, but not to the one chosen by Allah to hear what no others could. The entire army halted, birds quieted. The jinn paused. Soldiers exchanged glances. What had caused the prophet to stop? Suleman, peace be upon him, looked to the ground. His eyes softened. A small smile crept across his face, not of mockery but of awe. He had heard it. He had heard the whisper of the ant, not only her words, but her sincerity, her wisdom, her care. A creature most would crush without thought, had just taught a lesson in leadership, in caution, and in mercy. So he smiled, amused at her speech, and said, "My lord, inspire me to be thankful for your favors, which you have bestowed upon me and upon my parents, and to do righteousness that pleases you, and admit me by your mercy into the company of your righteous servants." In that moment, the prophet did not laugh arrogantly. He smiled with gratitude. He did not boast of his abilities. He turned to his Lord. He did not praise himself. He remembered his parents and prayed for their blessings. He did not dwell on his rank. He asked to be among the righteous. This was Suleman, and this was the whisper of an ant. How many armies have trampled the earth, proud and blind? How many kings have ruled with power but no humility? And how many creatures like that ant have been dismissed, unseen, unheard, crushed beneath the arrogance of mankind? Yet here, the Quran preserves forever the speech of a creature the size of a grain. Why? Because in her voice was concern, wisdom, and leadership. In Suleiman's response was humility, gratitude, and reflection. This was not just a meeting of prophet and insect. It was a divine lesson wrapped in the quietest moment. A story that reminds us, sometimes the greatest truth comes not from the throne, but from the earth. The army would move again. The valley would return to silence, but the lesson would remain eternal. And so the journey of Suleiman, peace be upon him, continued. But what lay ahead would test the hearts of jinn and men alike. The whisper of an ant. When a prophet listened, the valley of the ants had fallen behind them, but its wisdom lingered in the heart of Suleiman, peace be upon him. A single creature had reminded a mighty prophet of the responsibility that comes with power, of the presence of Allah's signs in every living being, and of the beauty of humility. But the journey was far from over. As the prophet king resumed his march, the terrain changed. The lush plains began to narrow. The sun climbed higher in the sky. Shadows grew shorter, and the hum of the birds above seemed to quiet. There was unease in the air, not of danger, but of something hidden. Suleiman, peace be upon him, felt it. His army, though orderly, sensed the change too. And then something was missing. In every journey his army had a particular formation. Men marched in ranks, jinn flanked both sides, and birds hovered above in a synchronized sweep. Among these birds was one that never failed to appear, a sentinel known for its loyalty, its swiftness, and its sharp gaze. The hudhud, the hoopoe bird, but now it was gone. What is it with me that I do not see the hudhud, or is it absent? Indeed, I will punish it severely or slaughter it unless it brings me a clear excuse. Suleiman, peace be upon him, was a prophet, yes, but also a ruler. Order was necessary. Structure was part of divine justice. Absence without reason could not be overlooked. Yet his words did not stem from tyranny. They were words of discipline. But even then he allowed space for justification. Unless it brings me a clear excuse, he would wait. He would judge only with knowledge, and knowledge was about to arrive on the wings of that very bird. Moments later, the hudhud returned, tired, wings dusted with sand, heart fluttering with urgency. It landed before the prophet king and bowed its head, respectfully but without fear. Its eyes burned with something Suleiman had seen before, revelation, or at least the echo of it. The hudhud began to speak. "I have discovered something you are not aware of. I have come to you from Sheba with sure news. Indeed, I found a woman ruling over them, and she has been given of all things, and she has a great throne. I found her and her people prostrating to the sun instead of Allah, and Satan has made their deeds appear pleasing to them and has barred them from the path. so they are not rightly guided. The Hudhud had flown far, beyond the mountains, over valleys and rivers, to a land known as Sheba, a land rich in wealth adorned with gardens and palaces. At its center stood a ruler, a queen, known for her wisdom, her command over her people, and her unmatched throne, an object of splendor carved from gold, silver, and precious stones. But despite all this, she and her people worshipped the sun. They bowed to a created object, forgetting the Creator. And this news weighed heavily on Suleman. Suleman, peace be upon him, did not scoff. He did not mock their ignorance. He did not immediately summon his army. Instead, he crafted a message, not of arrogance, but of dawah, of invitation, of truth. He would not force them. He would reach their minds first. Go with this letter of mine and deliver it to them, then step back and see how they respond. And the Hudhud, faithful and swift, took to the skies once more, this time not as a scout, but as a messenger of Tawheed. In a palace adorned with jewels and the scent of incense, the Queen of Sheba sat upon her throne. Advisers gathered around her, each bearing titles and opinions, and into this chamber flew the unexpected. A bird, not a diplomat, not a soldier, but a creature of the sky, descended with purpose and dropped a letter wrapped in royal script. She read it carefully. The words were short but mighty. Indeed it is from Suleman, and indeed it is, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Do not exalt yourselves against me, but come to me in submission to Allah. A queen, faced with a message not of conquest, but of truth. There was no demand for gold, no threats, only a call. Come to me in submission to Allah. And yet that message stirred her soul more than any sword could. She gathered her advisers. She did not act impulsively. Unlike many rulers, she asked for counsel. This was not weakness. It was wisdom. She was cautious but open. The first crack had appeared in the palace walls, not from war, but from light. Before her arrival, Suleman, peace be upon him, decided to test the queen, not to humiliate her, but to prepare her heart. He asked, "Who among you can bring me her throne before they come to me in submission?" A mighty jinn stepped forward. "I will bring it to you before you rise from your place." But another, one granted knowledge from the book, answered, "I will bring it to you in the blink of an eye." And before Suleman could even look away, the throne of Sheba stood before him. This was no magic, this was no trick, this was a miracle rooted in knowledge, not brute strength. Suleman, peace be upon him, was awed, not by the object, but by the power of Allah that made such a thing possible. And so he said, "This is by the grace of my Lord, to test me whether I will be grateful or ungrateful." He knew every power, every miracle, every gift, it was a test. Gratitude is not words, it is action. And Suleman, like his father before him, chose gratitude. The queen entered his court. Her eyes fell upon a throne that looked like hers, yet not exactly. "Is this your throne?" Suleman asked. She responded wisely, "It seems to be the same." Her heart stirred again. These were not ordinary men. This was not ordinary power, and the truth that had once been distant now stood before her. Then came one final moment. Suleman had a palace floor prepared of glass, clear as water with streams running beneath. The queen lifted her garment, thinking it was a pool, but Suleman told her, "It is a palace paved with glass." Another illusion, another test of perception. She had been deceived by appearances before, worshipping the sun, trusting what was seen. Now she was beginning to see beyond the surface. "My lord, indeed I have wronged myself, and I submit with Suleman to Allah, Lord of the worlds." She came not in chains, but in belief. Her journey was not one of defeat, but of awakening, from an ant that warned its people. To a bird that warned its prophet, to a queen that warned her soul, this was no ordinary story. This was divine orchestration. But what lay ahead for Suleman, peace be upon him, in the world of jinn and in the final days of his mission, was a lesson in mortality itself, and it too would be preserved. In silence, the whisper of an ant. When a prophet listened, the desert had cooled, the wind had slowed, and Prophet Suleman, peace be upon him, king of men, jinn, birds, and beasts, stood quietly in the deep hours of the night. Even with the vastness of his kingdom, his heart remained humble, tethered to the one who gave him everything. For Suleman, peace be upon him, power was not an ornament. It was a test. He had witnessed miracles. From the ant's whisper to the Queen of Sheba's submission. But now his journey was entering its final chapter. A realm remained that even many prophets seldom touched, a realm of beings made of smokeless fire, a realm of secrets, of rebellion, of service, the realm of the jinn, the covenant with the jinn Sulemans. Authority extended beyond the scene. The jinn, some obedient and others rebellious, were brought under his command by divine decree. And we subjected to Suleman the wind, blowing by his command gently wherever he directed. And the devils, jinn, every builder and diver, and others bound together in chains. The jinn served him in ways beyond human capability. They built towers and fortresses. They dived into oceans to retrieve treasures. And the most dangerous among them, those who sowed corruption, were shackled and restrained by Suleman's word. Yet this obedience did not come without fear. The jinn had witnessed Suleman's clarity, his justice, his absolute refusal to be deceived. They feared him, not for tyranny, but for his unwavering awareness. One jinn whispered to another, "He sees as though he knows our thoughts." But Suleman, peace be upon him, never relied on his own strength. He relied on revelation, on the guidance of Allah. A glimpse of arrogance among the jinn, whispers began to rise. What will happen when Suleman is no more? They did not know what the future held. They feared that without him they would regain their chaotic freedom. And in those shadows of speculation, something dangerous was growing. Pride. Some began to believe they could escape divine oversight once Suleman was gone. They mistook his rule as the only boundary to their disobedience. But Suleman, peace be upon him, had already foreseen this. He knew his death must be a lesson, not just for men but for jinn too, and Allah willed it so. The final prayer one day, Suleman, peace be upon him, stood silently in worship. He leaned upon his staff and entered deep contemplation, perhaps even sensing his end was near. The jinn were nearby, still at work. They watched him, his eyes unmoving, his posture still, his lips in remembrance. Time passed, then more, a full day, then another. Still he stood, they dared not interrupt him, for who among the jinn would question a prophet's devotion? They thought he was alive, watching them, judging them, and so they continued working in fear and discipline, unaware that his soul had returned to Allah. Then when we decreed death for him, nothing indicated to them his death except a creature of the earth eating his staff. But when he fell, it became clear to the jinn that if they had known the unseen, they would not have remained in humiliating punishment. A humble termite, hidden beneath the marble floors, began to nibble at the base of Suleman's staff. A creature, so small it was beneath notice, a being that had no speech, no army, no throne, and yet it carried the will of Allah. Bit by bit, day by day, the staff weakened, until finally, crack. Suleman's body collapsed. A loud sound filled the hall. The jinn stopped working. Panic spread like fire. Only then did they realize he had died days ago, and with that, the illusion was shattered. They had feared the eyes of a prophet, But now they knew the eyes of Allah never sleep. It was not Suleiman's presence that bound them, it was divine command. The purpose of Suleiman's death was not hidden from mankind. It was hidden from the jinn, so they would learn humility. They believed they could foresee things, access the unseen, manipulate the world. But their ignorance had been exposed by a termite. That was Allah's way. He humbles the proud with what they consider beneath them. A mighty king had fallen. But even in his death he taught a lesson, that truth is not always loud, that power does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers, like an ant beneath a hoof, like a worm beneath a staff. The legacy of Suleiman, peace be upon him, was not just a ruler. He was a listener. He listened to the ant when others would not. He listened to the bird when others doubted. He listened to the signs around him, even when they came from the lowliest of creatures. His strength was not in his army, or his wealth, or his miracles. It was in his humility before Allah, and his death became his final sermon. In the story of Suleiman, peace be upon him, we find layers of meaning, hidden between verses, folded within the folds of revelation. We see that greatness is not in commanding the jinn, but in recognizing that even an ant speaks truth. We learn that real power lies not in making others fear you, but in fearing only your Lord. And most importantly, we learn that even in death, a prophet teaches. Suleiman, peace be upon him, left behind no sons of tyranny, no palaces of arrogance, no monuments to himself. He left behind a story, one that began with an ant's whisper and ended with a worm's bite. A story meant to awaken hearts, a story meant for those who listen.